Monday. A few spots of rain, but also some decent sunshine. And in the sunshine, highs at 14 or 15, but feeling pretty cool under the rain.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo, and a happy Easter to you all. Blessings fell upon London as the stormy weather eased just in time to create a placid River Thames upon which Cambridge cruised to victory over Oxford in both the women's and men's boat races. Things seemed bad for the government when Professor John Curtis on this channel predicted that the Labour Party has a 99% chance of forming the next government. But a poll of 15,000 voters published in the Sunday Times today suggests an election held in the last few days would have returned fewer than 100 Conservative MPs and more than 460 Labour. The headlines this last week were ghastly. NHS satisfaction at a record low. The debacle at Thames Water is widely regarded as a general indictment of that most Tory of policy's privatisation. And a new honours list rewarded a Conservative donor and Conservative MPs. Our top political panel will discuss this further damage to a beleaguered government. Even in the realm of defence, traditionally a strong Conservative territory, new polling suggests that Labour is more trusted. That's significant amid warnings from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk that there is a real prospect of war on the European continent. I'll discuss that view with the defence editor at the Evening Standard and a former British Army colonel. Turning to more bucolic subjects, the art of hedge laying in England goes back more than 4,000 years. The skills of those few hardy yeomen who still practice it are increasingly in demand as farmers seek natural ways to boost wildlife, manage water filtration and absorb carbon. Richard Negus has been laying hedges for decades and has now written a book. And ending the morning hour of the programme, Stefan Kyriazis will review a trio of musicals. All of that is to come, but first your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, King Charles is attending an Easter Sunday service in Windsor. Joined by the Queen, it's his first significant public appearance since his cancer diagnosis. Other members of the royal family are also there, but the Prince and Princess of Wales are missing the service as Catherine continues her cancer treatment. Royal biographer and former photographer Ian Lloyd says the King's attendance is a good sign.
The fact that they issued a statement saying that he's going is a positive step because when the Queen was frail and the Queen Mother was frail, it was usually wait and see on the day approach. Do you know what I mean? So to sort of just see how they would cope. The fact that a few days ago they announced he was going is to be seen as a positive sign, I think.
The Pope is leading Easter Mass at the Vatican amid concerns over his health. Thousands of people have turned out to see Pope Francis, who's been greeting crowds. His appearance welcome after he failed to attend a major Good Friday procession, cancelling at the last minute. The Vatican says the decision was made to preserve his health ahead of a vigil yesterday and today's Easter Sunday Mass. Pope Francis will hold Mass and his Orbi et Orbi, his message to the city and the world. The blessing will be watched globally. In his Easter message, the Prime Minister paid tribute to the work of churches and Christian communities across the country.
Happy Easter, everyone. This weekend, as people come together to celebrate and reflect on the message at the heart of the Easter festival, I want to pay tribute to the incredible work of Christians in this country. The churches, charities, volunteers and fundraisers who live the Christian values of compassion, charity and self-sacrifice, supporting those in need and demonstrating what it means to love thy neighbour.
And Sir Keir Starmer also posted on social media saying it's a time for optimism and new beginnings. The Easter messages come as a new poll suggests the Tories are on track for their worst general election result. Survation found the party could win fewer than 100 seats, with Labour predicted to sweep to power with a landslide victory of 468 seats. The 15,000-person poll indicated the Conservatives would be wiped out in Scotland and Wales and hold just 98 seats in England. The Energy Secretary has warned that Labour's dangerous net zero plans would leave Britain at the mercy of China. Labour has pledged to convert the country to clean power by 2030. That's 5 years earlier than the Conservatives. But Claire Coutinho told The Telegraph the plan would leave the UK over-reliant on Chinese-made metals, cables and batteries, just as Europe was weaning itself off Russian oil and gas. And there are calls for suicide prevention support for teachers, following a rise in the profession of people taking their lives. A survey has found nearly a quarter of teachers use alcohol to cope with stresses of the job, while 12% have used antidepressants. The poll of teaching union members found almost 9 in 10 believe their job has adversely affected their mental health in the past 12 months. And a new gender clinic for children are due to open in England after a year-long delay and a waiting list of thousands. The news comes as the Tavistock Clinic in London officially closes its doors after a review found it was not safe for children. Around 250 patients were being treated at the controversial site. As of tomorrow, responsibility for their care will be transferred to the new clinics in the north and south of the country. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Sophia Wensler. Well, Rishi Sunak's torrid time in number 10 continues, but who knows how long for? A poll published in the Sunday Times suggests that had the election been held in the last few days, the Conservatives would be wiped out in Scotland and Wales and would hold just 98 seats in England. Only 13 of 28 cabinet members would hold their seats. Portillo moments would be the norm, or would be renamed Mordaunt moments or Cleverly moments. NHS satisfaction is at a record low. Consumers are outraged by the proposal made by Thames Water to hike their bills, and the government's latest honours list prompted accusations of cronyism. The Tory ship is full speed ahead for the rocks. To discuss all of that, I have an excellent political panel, political commentator and former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew, GB News' own Albie Amankona, and Darren Grimes. Very nice to see you all. Good morning and happy Easter. Paul, is this poll credible? Is it possible that the Tories are going to come in with fewer than 100 seats?
I think it is very credible. Good sources tell me that number 10's private polling is coming up with similar figures. So I gather are Labour's, although Labour are determined not to be seen to be complacent or crowing. So I don't think they would be even telling anybody in confidence, you know, or certainly not in public anyway, what their results are. But I think, and you had the extraordinary situation. The Daily Mail even seemed to be cooling on the Sunak and even the Tory government. I mean, you had often its mouthpiece Richard Littlejohn last Friday in his column saying Richie Sunak is a decent man, but he's run out of ideas, he's run out of road, call an election now, with the now in caps with an exclamation mark. And you had yesterday's Daily Mail saying that now Labour are trusted more than the Tories on defence, with an exclamation mark again on there, and a stinging leader. So, although I can't see the Mail coming out and actually doing a complete cheerleading role for Keir Starmer, I think they may be somewhat lukewarm or even fence-sitting when it comes to the crunch, unless something happens to change the polls.
Paul, sticking with you talked about what's going on inside number 10. One of the complaints that's made about Rishi Sunak, one of the reasons that's given for why it might be better to change the leader at this stage, is that people describe number 10 as the place that policies go to die. They talk about this sort of stonewalling effect, this control mania in number 10, which is stopping anything happening. Do you hear anything of that?
What I do hear is that there are, if you like, two camps within number 10. Some arguing for an early poll in June, others saying stick with the October plan. I think November is probably less likely because quite a few advisors suggest that coincided too much with the US election will actually divert attention, media coverage, and confuse the issues. So if I was forced to put a bet on, I would still say mid-October, but if it was June, I wouldn't be that surprised.
Darren, do you
the second local elections are going to be the crunch. That's when I'm sure there will be moves to try to unseat Sunak. Whether they can get anywhere or not, I don't know.
Well, let me adjust the question I was going to ask to Darren. Is it possible for the Prime Minister to survive with a poll like this?
I think we're all in the same position. You know, you mentioned the Mail there and sort of not coming out full-throated for Sir Keir Starmer. I think the nation is in the same position where there isn't this groundswell of love for Sir Keir Starmer. The Labour vote, I would argue, isn't rock solid. I think the Prime Minister can survive a poll like this. He can't survive an actual poll, perhaps, when it comes to the local elections. We've got in the northeast of England a mayoral election for the first time for the full region. Now, that will be massive. You have a Corbynista candidate who is standing against the Labour candidate and then the Conservative Party candidate. Same in North Yorkshire. You have a candidate, that Conservative candidate there against Labour. It's going to be really interesting to see if they lose all of their elected mayors, who, of course, have been power bases for shoring up votes and saying, look what we can do to level up. And if they lose those power bases, then I really think that's probably when we all know that the game is up and the writing is very much on the wall.
I mean, funnily enough, sticking with you, Darren, funnily enough, in running up to 1997, we didn't think that the disaster was going to be as great as it actually was. I mean, I rather tend to think it might be, but on the whole, the view was that the polls were so extreme they couldn't possibly be true. And I think that's one of the reasons why John Major survived to fight the election. But I just wonder, what is the psychological impact of this sort of poll on Conservative members of Parliament?
Well, it must be extraordinary. It must be excruciating. I don't think if anyone was thinking of jumping into a reform-shaped lifeboat, I wonder if that's getting a few people thinking about that. I know certain MPs are on manoeuvres.
Wouldn't be a very good lifeboat, though, would it? Well, it would just sink straight away.
Well, I mean, when it comes to men, for example, they're outpolling the Conservatives.
So do you think the Reform Party will win a seat?
Looks like Albie is quite keen to go into the discussion. Albie, I'm sorry that we've kept you waiting, and thank you for the patience that you've demonstrated. We come to you now. Could you address that question I put to Darren a moment ago? What is the psychological impact of this poll? I mean, it seems to me, in a way, it almost doesn't matter at this stage whether the poll is right or wrong. The fact that the poll exists, the fact that, you know, the majority of MPs, even the majority of the cabinet, is being told that they're not going to hold their seats at the next election, that must be devastating. What will it make them do?
The Conservatives polling badly is not something new for the Conservative Party. We know that we have been polling badly. Tory MPs know that they have been polling badly. We've been polling badly, Michael, since Liz Truss was the Prime Minister. There was a bit of a rebound when Rishi came into power, but the situation hasn't really improved since autumn 2022. So what
hasn't really improved?
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't really improved. These are the statistics. I'm not going to argue with the fact the polls are not looking good at the moment. The polls were not looking good in autumn 2022, and things have not really improved since that time.
Now, Albie, what I'm trying to put to you is this. The understanding that people had until quite recently, I think, was that the Conservatives were going to lose the election. And then there was a debate about whether they'd lose it by 50 or 100 or whatever. This says that the Conservatives, had the poll been held last week, would have been annihilated. Yeah. That is completely different.
It's not the only one either, poll saying it.
No, and this isn't, you know, things haven't improved since Truss. This is that things have reached an historic position. And as I say to you, not a position we had to cope with in 1997, because that was not at least our expectation.
What I would say to people who are getting overexcited about this poll, as I think many of us are, is that the only poll that matters is the general election. And hold on, let me make the point. And the point that I will make is that people are not exactly excited about the Labour Party. We don't know what any of their policies are. We don't know what their policies are on how they're going to stop the boats. We don't know what their policies are on levelling up. We don't know what their policies are on tax and spend. We don't know anything about them. All we do know is that people are angry with the Conservatives. But I do think when the manifestos are out, when the MPs are out there making the case for their political parties, it will be a choice between Labour and the Conservatives. Darren's reform lifeboat dream is just not going to happen. And I think when the public are faced with that choice, I think things will be closer.
Paul Connew, do you know anything about MRP? MRP is the system that is used in these polls. Now, the reason The reason that we're getting excited about this poll, Albie, is that 15,000 people were interviewed. That's a very large number of people. A huge amount of resource has been put into this poll. And what this poll does, it tries to understand the sort of people that exist in Britain and the tendencies that they have to vote. And then it translates that seat by seat and produces these results. It's had quite good results in the past. But Paul, I get very suspicious about polling because, you know, I used to think very naively that an opinion poll was you asked people what they thought and then you published it. No, not at all. What you do is you put it through computers and algorithms and you apply all sorts of prejudices to it and you make sure that you're not an outlying poll because you don't want to be humiliated if you get it wrong. So how much can we trust this MRP methodology?
You're right about the risk of an outlying poll, but the trouble is that different methods by different pollsters are all coming up. You had probably our best-known psephologist, Sir John Curtis, on Friday or Thursday, saying it was 99% certain there was going to be a Labour government. You had a distinguished Oxford University poll coming up with virtually the same statistic. So I think the idea that the polls could be misleading, you know, I'm in an odd position of somebody who did some research in the Red Wall, as it wasn't then called, in 2016, and predicted, even though I'm a staunch Remainer, that Leave would actually win. I would not make any prediction that the Tory party can possibly win this election unless something absolutely, you know, unpredictable happened.
I somehow feel we're not quite on the same page. I think a lot of Tories have understood for quite a long time that they weren't going to win, but this is telling them that they're going to be annihilated. Let's just talk about recent events. Were you pretty shocked, Darren, by that honours list that was produced, the Easter honours list?
Wasn't shocked, but I was puzzled by the timing. Why now? You know, why now? Is this the Prime Minister deciding that actually in 12 months' time...
What is the good time to advertise that if someone gives you £5 million, they'll get a night?
Well, that's a fair point, but I think it's probably a good time for Rishi Sunak because he doesn't think he's going to be around much longer because in 12 months' time he's going to be leading a Silicon Valley social media company or something like that, which he is more suited to the office of Prime Minister.
And let me ask Albie one last question, because you used the word "we" the other day, the other moment, referring to the Conservatives. So it sounds like you're a Conservative. I put so much effort into privatisation. What's going on with Thames Water has discredited the whole concept of privatisation, has it not?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, Michael, because I was out yesterday reporting at the Oxford and Cambridge boat race, asking the public this very question, whether or not they think privatisation has failed and if Thames Water is an example of privatisation failing, because the rowers couldn't even go into the Thames yesterday because it's so full of E. coli, because Thames Water was dumping sewage in the Thames. And every single member of the public that I spoke to said that they thought privatisation has failed. So do you accept that it is a failure?
I think it has been horribly abused, and maybe we were naive in not foreseeing the ways in which it would be abused.
Virtually no other European nation doesn't have a effectively nationalised water system.
No other nation has the NHS. I'm not particularly impressed by that argument. Thank you very much. It sounds as though the Tories may be washed away by the tidal flow. Thank you very much, Albie Amankona, Paul Codnew and Darren Grimes. King Charles is appearing in public this morning for the Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. It's his first proper public engagement since he was diagnosed with cancer. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has the details. Hello, Cameron. Could I ask you, first of all, I mean, given the risk to the King's health of being with the public, of possibly getting an infection, why do you think the King was so insistent on appearing today?
Good morning, Michael, and happy Easter to you. I think the King, if you just listen to what his nephew said last week, Peter Phillips, he said the King has been incredibly frustrated not to be able to be out and about with members of the public. He said he was saddened to not be able to attend the Maundy Thursday service this week. And I think the King was very determined to provide some sort of reassurance following the Princess of Wales's cancer diagnosis and undergoing treatment. It was a huge shock to the public. And clearly, I think he's aware of this perception of a very, very slimmed down monarchy indeed at the moment. And The king as well has a deep faith. He's head of the Church of England, and him attending a service on one of the most significant days in the Christian calendar would have been very, very important to him. Now, the service has had to be adjusted because he is still undergoing cancer treatments, which means he cannot be around large.
Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. After the break, we'll be talking about the security of Europe amid dire warnings that have come from the Polish Prime Minister that war with Russia is a distinct possibility. Stay with us, please. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Patrick Christys Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Has the NHS killed your relative and then lied to you about it? There is an alleged cover-up culture in the NHS. They lie to you about why your loved one died, about poor care, then bury documents with evidence in them, and they try to silence staff who speak out. This is according to the NHS Ombudsman. There are around 11,000 avoidable deaths every year. 11,000. Someone's mum dies, their children know something dodgy happened, and then they're met with a rotten culture, including the altering of care plans, the disappearance of crucial documents, and complete denials. They lie to you, but they really get away with it because the NHS is like a religion and people dare not criticise it. You'd be accused of NHSophobia. The annual budget is around £180 billion and we now have about 2 million people working for the NHS. They cannot keep blaming everything on being underfunded and understaffed. If they're covering up medical negligence, it means the problem doesn't get dealt with and it keeps happening. And that is the fault of the NHS managers, the people who run it. They've got the money for 837 non-clinical staff working at English hospitals on the highest paid Band 9 contracts, which is between £99,000 and £115,000 a year. How many nurses would that pay for? How many junior doctors? And they've got the time on their hands to think about making the NHS the world's first carbon-neutral health service. They've got time to consider whether women in labour should be picked up by an electric ambulance that might have to be recharged en route to the hospital. There are NHS managers with a budget of £180 billion, 2 million members of staff, and they're crying about being understaffed and under-resourced. If they spent more time looking after patients instead of finding ways to cover up avoidable deaths, then maybe we'd have a better health service. Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Donald Tusk, that is the Polish Prime Minister, didn't mince his words this week when he warned that Europe is in a pre-war era. In Ukraine, Russia shows tenacity and is predicted to launch a summer offensive. Vladimir Putin's mandate has been renewed after a sham election. The country has settled on vastly increased military expenditure. The scene is set for more aggression. To debate how we can respond, I have with me in the studio Robert Fox, the defence editor at the Evening Standard.
Good morning.
Very, very good to see you.
Good morning. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you. But I feel not very happy this Easter concerning this story. The tone, I think, in the press this morning is that we're looking at the possibility of Ukrainian defeat, and frustratingly, possibly a defeat that even at this stage, Western allies could avoid. What do you think?
Yes, I think, first of all, retreat and defeat, that is on the cards. Don't want to be over self-regarding, but I wrote that we are facing setback, but we are facing the very possibility, if the combination of things go right for Russia, standoff bombs, attacking Odessa as well as on the front, and a huge build-up of numbers, of munitions and personnel, 1.3 million in reserve altogether. Whether that defeat is tactical, temporary, or catastrophic. Either way, and this is what Donald Tusk was warning, it is very, very bad news for Europe. And the trouble is, with warning Europe about the real danger, which includes the area in which Britain sits, that if you really warn too early, people will be put off. They say you're frightening the horses, and if you do it too late, it will be too late. And we're in a very, very dangerous position. And what Donald Tusk was saying is that the European allies, particularly through NATO and the EU, have not got their act together. Ukraine is running out of ammunition. That's a simple point.
On the one hand, we have the problem in the United States, where the arms supply is blocked in Congress, and then we have the issue of whether Donald Trump will become president. But in Europe, our procurement systems are failing. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely hopeless. They've talked about it for years and years and years. I think very likely when you were Defence Secretary, that we're going to coordinate, that the European entity, whether it was the EC or the EU, would get this aspect together. By the way, I think we have to say to Europe, Britain is very much involved in defence, but the European Union framework for defence and security, it plays second. You've got to work through NATO and you've got to get it together. But it's very reminiscent of things we saw in the last century, where ammunition stocks run out. The lack of ammunition, particularly artillery ammunition, is absolutely the symptom of the crisis. And we've got to work out at different stages, UK, how we work with allies, how we're going to deal with reforming our own system in defence. It's a very big ask that will happen to the new government that comes in after the election. There will have to be a defence review, and it must revolve around 3 or 4 very simple principles.
I was indeed immensely frustrated by the procurement system when I was in office, and also, as you can imagine, very insistent that NATO had to be the primary organisation for collective defence. Colonel Richard Kemp, who's formerly an officer in the British Army, can join us now. Richard, do you take the view that at this stage, the Europeans, if they got their act together, could make a material difference to the defence of Ukraine?
I think they certainly could, but it's probably too late for that. I think it's possible that something significant could be done, but I think that we've had over 2 years now of insufficient support for Ukraine from the US and, of course, from Europe as well, and that's put Ukraine in the position it's in today. I think it's going to, Russia's been on the offensive to a limited extent anyway for a number of months now, and there's not really a hell of a lot stopping them from continuing with that. And I think unless we're able to get significant amounts of particularly artillery, tank ammunition, long-range missiles, and of course aircraft to Ukraine, we're not going to turn the situation around now, I'm afraid.
Richard, a thought that I heard expressed this morning, which struck me like a thunderbolt, is that if Russia were to take over Ukraine, it gains the armaments of Ukraine and the 800,000 who are enlisted in the Ukrainian forces, which puts it in a much stronger position to initiate its next offensive.
Yeah, I think that's obviously a real danger. I'm not sure it's very likely to happen. I suspect that Putin won't go full blast out to take over the whole of Ukraine. I think he'll probably be more willing to keep what he's got and maybe expand the territory further and come to some kind of an agreement, some kind of peace agreement, probably forced upon Ukraine by the Americans. I think that's a more likely outcome. But you're of course right that if he does go full blast into Ukraine and take over the whole country, then he's got a hell of a lot more power than he already has now, potentially.
Thank you, Richard. Let me ask Robert. Which are the places that we should be worried about? Moldova, Poland, the Baltic states?
Yes, and the Arctic. But the problem is that we have seen activity off the programme in the Eastern Mediterranean. They've taken over Benghazi. They've got 2 ports there. They're moving into Africa because they are now part of the axis of disruption. And the new factor in this, that Putin is absolutely clear, the solid allies for supply, and it will continue, on North Korea and Iran. Donald Tusk's point, as you know, is that it's not going to stop here. This is what the 3 Baltic countries are advising us, and there is this alliance, and they look very much to Britain, curiously, of Poland, and then the Joint Expeditionary Force, who are the Nordics. Now, Finland, Poland, Norway, what have they got in common? They have got a border with Russia, and they're very worried about it. But it's very interesting. We show pictures of ground forces. In the next few months, as one of the senior advisors to the MOD, Dr. Rob Johnson, was pointing out in a talk last week, a lot is going to happen in the air and on the sea. And on the sea, in keeping Odessa open, it's where Britain and Britain's advice, which has been actually very strong and very practical up to now, is absolutely critical.
You imply, of course, a new division in Europe, which is between those who have a border with Russia or are very close to Russia, who have sort of, as it were, got it, and the rest of us who kind of haven't got it. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Richard Kemp, and here in the studio, Robert Fox. I'll be changing tack after the break. We'll explore the ancient art of hedge laying and its new application to sustainable farming. Stay with us, please.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
The Guardian's not happy, everybody, because one of their headline stories today was about a private members club that is for gentlemen only, the Garrick Club I refer to in London. There's accusations now, Quinton, that it's all the kind of upper echelons of society, all the powerful...
It's a cabal of important, powerful people who are running the country.
And I thought to myself, when I heard descriptions like that, I bet Quinton Letts is somehow involved. Are you?
I've been to the Garrick a few times.
Why can't women be members?
Because it's a gents' club. My daughter, one of my daughters, is a member of an all-women's club called the University Women's Club, and they don't allow blokes in. It's an outrage. No, it's not. It's a free country.
I mean, it's archaic and it needs to change.
What is?
You know, is my view. The fact that the Garrick doesn't admit women members. There are lots of these members clubs, you know, across London, probably in other parts of the country as well. And you know, you have to pay for membership, so it is well-to-do members of society that go. I've nothing against them existing, but all of them have changed their constitution. Those that were once men only, you know, they all now admit women. The only exception now is the Garrick. My other thought is, well, why are we talking about it if we've got nothing more important going on?
Just to be frank, I genuinely could not care less if there is a club that I'm not allowed into because of my sex. I do, though, think that if you're going to start...
You're allowed in there. They let them in.
Yeah, but not as members.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're going to start, you know, having all of this kind of respect and all the rest of it for single-sex spaces for men, then you can't, as a society, allow the ridiculousness that goes on in female spaces when a man sticks a dress on and a wig maybe and a bit of lipstick if he's feeling bold and says that he's called Sharon and then wants to be allowed into that space, and then those establishments then buckle and let those men actually into things like changing rooms of women. That really, really annoys me.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
So, welcome back. The earliest written record regarding hedge laying is contained in Julius Caesar's account of the conquest of Gaul. But by then, the practice was probably already 2,000 years old. The ancient art is gaining renewed impetus today in Britain as a means to partition fields, sustain wildlife, manage water filtration and absorb carbon. And that's thanks to people like Richard Negus, who've kept this skill alive. Richard's been laying hedges in East Anglia for decades and has written a book, Words from the Hedge, a hedge layer's view of the countryside. I'm very pleased that he joins me now. Happy Easter, welcome to GB News, Richard. You have pointed out the paradox that the hedge is full of nature, but the hedge is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. So if it's not naturally occurring, how has it occurred?
Well, it's courtesy, really, of our farming heritage. The archaeologist Francis Pryor discovered in a fenland ditch in the 80s a little tiny little barb of hedge layer's brash, and he realised with some further digging that that was the first hedge, the oldest hedge in Europe, 2,500 BC. And it stands to reason that if there was a hedge planted by man to retain livestock, as they know that this was, then there had to be hedge layers, because a hedge is only a hedge if you maintain it by man, courtesy of the art of laying or otherwise coppicing a hedge, because otherwise that hedge just turns back into either a linear wood or a block of scrub.
Now, you've described the physical impact upon you of laying a hedge. Do you want to go through that briefly?
Well, my arms are somewhat scarred and tattered, even though I wear very large leather gauntlets. They are lacerated. I've got my right shoulder is a lot larger than my left shoulder, because this is the one I use for my bill hook and where every stake that I hit in. And also I've got a middle-aged stoop, probably a bit early, because it's a very physical job, and obviously you're dealing with these thorny, prickly, shrubby species. And yeah, it takes its wear and tear, particularly on a middle-aged man like me. I'm starting to feel old-aged now.
You've talked there about the brawn that you employ, but you also need brain to be a hedge layer. Explain that. What is it you're having to think about as you lay hedges?
I believe you do, because the brawn bit is obvious. It's a physical job, but the brain is that you've got to understand the ecology of the hedgerow, and you've got to understand the farming practices, the farming needs, and the economy of farming. I also think what you really need to understand is that you are manufacturing, you are man-making a habitat. So therefore you have to have an understanding of a mosaic of the landscape. And by that, what I mean is that when we lay a line of hedge, it is denuded for wildlife for a brief period. And if you don't realise how wildlife will move about, if we laid every single hedge on one farm in one season, it would be very bad for wildlife, and probably actually very bad for the farm too. So therefore we have to understand how you can manipulate the landscape with a beneficial thing for wildlife and for the farm. This is very much a partnership between farming and nature recovery.
And tell me about the sweep of ecological benefits. So it's a habitat for things like yellowhammers, but what else? How does it play a role in things like filtration and carbon recovery and things like that?
Yeah, well, for filtration, it's an interesting one. One of my customers and neighbour near here, they did a trial with some perennial wildflower strips through arable fields, and they were looking at how they might retain filtration from inputs of fertilizers, chemicals, etc. And what they realized was that if you also had these buffers of grassland, these margins as we call them, but you also had a hedge, the water quality that was going into those ditches was improved. And the water companies immediately saw the benefit in this, because all of a sudden the water that they were getting at their filtration plants required less filtration. So therefore they financially rewarded the farmers for having clean water, and that hedge, the root structure, filters through the chemicals or the nitrates or the soil that's going through that in before it goes into the ditch. I think there's also, carbon's a very interesting one. Yes, we know that the hedgerow is a good means of sequestering carbon. However, there is a negative to that, is if you have one size perfect 2 meters by 2 meters, that's going to store lots of carbon. That's terrible actually for wildlife, because you're back to a monoculture. And so therefore, a 2 meter high hedge, that's fine for a yellowhammer, but it's useless for a turtle dove or a bullfinch that wants to nest higher. So that's back to that narrative I'm talking about of a mosaic, and that's why we plan. So the hedge laying season finishes in a couple of days' time at the end of this month, and then we have a little bit of a break, and then we come back usually after harvest, and we will go and plot and map hedges on farms, and we'll do a management plan which will give us an idea that for the next 5 and 10 years as to which hedges will lay when, so that mosaic is maintained. So carbon's an interesting one. We all know that farmers are under huge pressure to be the carbon sink for Britain. They've been given yet another task to do, but the hedge is only part of it, I think, really, because the hedge that is there now, I would say, predominantly for wildlife, and to have a carbon-friendly hedge doesn't necessarily mean it's a nature-friendly hedge.
Richard, would you remind me of the title of your book, please?
My book's Words from the Hedge. It's published by Unbound. It's a bit of a pun, to be perfectly honest, because it's a pun on a Jethro Tull album called Songs from the Wood. And it's because I believe that, in a way, the hedge is a bit like the original Jethro Tull's horse-drawn hoe, a plough, that we have been manipulating the landscape since more or less we realised that we could farm easier than we could hunt. And I suppose my Words from the Hedge is about the fact that we have an impact on the landscape, and that's usually through farming. And hedges, they're a great impact that we can have as a legacy for others, and it's my job to look after these wonderful arteries of the land. And that's what my book is trying to show.
Richard Negus, author of Words from the Hedge, thank you very much indeed. After the break, Stefan Kyriazis will shepherd us through the latest musical theatre productions. Stay with me.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, today, for most of us, we do start the day with some sunshine, but it will turn increasingly cloudy, especially across the south. So we can see the sunshine across many parts of Scotland, Western England and Wales, but further east, there's already cloud moving in. That will spread its way gradually a little bit further westward. So for many central and eastern parts of England, a rather grey afternoon to come. Brighter elsewhere across England and Wales, but the best of sunshine really for Scotland and Northern Ireland. But here we will see a scattering of showers. Temperatures in the sunshine not doing too badly again, 14 or 15 degrees. Into the evening, we start to see this band of rain move in from the continent, and that really is going to give us a fairly wet night across many parts of England. That rain then spreads across parts of Wales too in the small hours of Easter Monday. But all the time, Scotland and Northern Ireland a little bit dry here, and in any clear skies we will see a touch of frost. So for many parts of England and Wales on Easter Monday, it's going to be a pretty wet affair. Some of the rain will be heavy, giving some fairly poor travelling conditions in places. It does brighten up down towards Devon and Cornwall though, but all the time, Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing the best of the weather on Easter Monday. A few spots of rain, but also some decent sunshine. And in the sunshine, highs at 14 or 15, but feeling pretty cool under the rain. Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Stefan Kyriazis is here with 3 reviews of new musicals. I have read your reviews, Stefan,
Yes.
of Opening Night, and what an enjoyable read it is. Unless, of course, you happen to be a member of the cast or the production team, in which case, I mean, you must be in a state of depression today. You absolutely savaged it with a penchant review.
Yes, and I'm not alone. This one, there's been a lot of 1 and 2 stars, and lots of critics fudge around a 3-star if they don't love something, but they still find there are things to admire in this.
Opening Night, let's introduce it.
Yes.
Who's in it?
So this is Opening Night. It's based on the John Cassavetes 1977 film. Big name, Sheridan Smith. So she is a big draw. She will draw audiences automatically. They come for her. Almost doesn't matter what she's in. Director Ivo van Hove, Belgian, let's say, conceptual artist-director. So his shows are very Marmite anyway. But this is based very closely on the 1977 film. But it's this thing again, it's mixing camera work, which I'm already a little bit, I know it's the new thing, but I'm already a bit tired of. And she's been hitting headlines for collapsing in the street, on the street outside in Soho. And obviously, for me, it was a bit gimmicky. It's a bit of a stunt. It's going to get headlines. It creates a bit of interest. I don't know that it's necessary for the play. That's filmed, relayed to us. There is a huge screen inside. But unlike Sarah Snook, where we had all these different screens for Dorian Gray, this screen pretty much generally shows what's happening right in front of us. But I found it gave me a headache. It's very distracting. It's right there, but the actors are there. You can see them.
You even talked about bad acting.
I think there's some really established musical theatre stars in here, and I think they're some of the worst performances they've probably ever given. And I don't know whether they're a bit abandoned in this crazy concept. It's an actress called Myrtle who is they're rehearsing and doing previews for a play. The actress herself is having a bit of a breakdown. The character in the play is having a breakdown. The actress doesn't like the play. Her ex-husband is playing her husband in the play. There's also an ex-husband in the play. The producer loves her. She sleeps with the director. The writer hates her. And there's all these people on stage all the time. For me, it's impenetrable. I know what it's trying to do. There's concepts of a woman's place in theatre, art and artist, self and self-destruction. What is real? She starts hallucinating a girl that gets hit by a car at the start of the play, played by Shira Haas, who is extraordinary, the actress from Unorthodox. But you really don't know what's going on. And then there are moments where she's improvising the play and you don't know if it's rehearsals, if she's on stage, where we are. Genuinely, I saw a few people snoozing. I kind of wish I had. I find it frustrating. I think I'm all for bold experimental theatre, but I don't know that the West End is the place for it. And the critics that loved it would argue, yes, that is where it should be.
Well, it will draw the crowds over Sheridan Smith, would it?
Yes, but those crowds are paying a lot of money. And as has been in the papers again yesterday and today, they are often leaving. Again, a friend of a friend left to the interval. So I think to me, it doesn't feel like it's completely formed in itself. I also just don't think it should be in the West End.
Let's moonwalk on to MJ.
To MJ. Now, Michael Jackson, new musical. Again, quite a lot of controversy, but we've got a lovely little clip to get you in the mood.
I said you wanna be starting something. You got
to be starting something. I said you wanna be starting something. You got to be starting something.
So it looks like the choreography and the dance is superb. Would that be right?
It's absolutely stunning. It's by Christopher Wheeldon. Now, he has already won 2 Tony Awards, was also with the New York City Ballet for a long time. He's choreographed for the Royal Ballet, the English National Ballet. He did An American in Paris, the stage musical adaptation, which I loved. Exquisite. Yes, the movement in this is incredible, and it is obviously based on Michael Jackson's life, so it is his movements, but he also...
a portion of it.
It's based very cleverly on a well-chosen portion of his life. So it's 1992. He's setting up the Dangerous Tour. He's having financial problems, and he can talk about all his childhood traumas and his father, but we don't really touch on what's looming ahead, which is a wise decision. Some critics then have said, well, then what's the point? I would say this show's goal is to show the man and how he created his music and what it came from. How did a small child sing with the pain of an adult?
Because I'm a great fan of Wagner, I'm very used to dealing with this question.
Yes.
Can you separate the man from the art?
Yes.
And this arises very strongly in this case. I assume the audience leapt to its feet at the end.
The audience screamed and cheered all the way through. The minute it opens with Beat It, you get a tremendous recreation of Thriller, but kind of reinvented as an almost kind of New Orleans Day of the Dead Mexican mashup. It's spectacular. The moments where he pulls out the white sequin glove or the fedora or strikes a pose, the gold shades and the gold jacket from the Dangerous Tour. These are all iconic Michael moments, those bass lines that you hear. But you also see him, the actor, it has to be said, Miles Frost, got this job. I think he was still just about a teenager. They couldn't find anyone for the role. They pulled him off the internet where he'd posted a little video that was trending.
Good Lord.
Absolutely extraordinary. He won the Tony Award on Broadway, youngest man ever to win the lead in a musical. He's incredible. There are moments when you almost... He's got the breathy voice, he can do the movement, he can do the kind of skittery man-child.
So it sounds like there's a real premium to see it while he's in the role.
Yeah, he's absolutely... he did it for a long time on Broadway. He's transferred to here. He will be doing it as far as we know. There's no date yet. And this is booking open-ended. The crowd went absolutely nuts. You have to accept this for what it is.
Yeah.
It's a whole other story if you're going to do something else about Michael Jackson's life and his demons. But for what it is... it's tremendous, and it is, yes, beautifully choreographed and staged.
It's just time for a cabaret.
Life is a cabaret, Michael. We've got a teeny tiny clip here, superstar new cast.
So I've been to this cabaret twice. The mise en scène is extraordinary.
Yes.
So they've converted a theatre into a round cabaret. That is absolutely superb. For me, that's a bit where the good news ended. I didn't think the performances were a patch on the movie from the 1970s, I'm guessing. And the way in which the plot had been interfered with, I thought was schmaltzy and sentimental and added nothing. Anyway. It's the same show, but a new cast.
Yes, pretty much it's a very clever... They're very clear what they're doing. Every 3 months, new names in the 2 lead roles of Sally and the MC. And they're either theatre stars or established stars. So this time we've got Cara Delevingne. She's very good, really very good. Remembering that the character's not supposed to be a great singer. Luke Treadaway is the MC. I have Eddie Redmayne in my head, and nothing can ever top that. But I find it beautiful and disturbing. It's not quite, but there are moments. I took a friend who didn't know anything.
Did you think it was as good as the movie?
It's different. I took a young friend. Yeah. She's 23, 24, knew nothing about it. Very much a pop culture girl. And for her, it blew her mind. She came out wanting to talk about all the issues, all the thoughts, parallels to today. So for that, I think it's a strong show.
And I would say the total experience of the show is worthwhile.
Absolutely stunning.
The way you go into the theatre, what happens to you before you get into the theatre, which I'm not going to reveal because I don't want to do a spoiler. So, all right, go along to Cabaret. But I would say definitely watch the movie as well. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Stefan. Happy Easter to you. You're watching Michael Portillo on GB News, Britain's news channel. That ends the first hour, but stay tuned. I'll be back at 12 noon. We'll be discussing how to avoid another horror like the one in Batley, Yorkshire, where a teacher remains in hiding after showing pupils a picture of the Prophet Muhammad.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. Well, the best of the weather today continues to be across the northwest of the UK. We will see some heavy rain pushing in from the south, and that's thanks to low pressure still dominating the weather pattern and will do for the next week or so as well, bringing in further spells of rain over the next 24 hours or so. But for the rest of the day, best of the sunshine across Scotland, perhaps northern England into Northern Ireland too. This morning's rain clearing here. Generally cloudier skies across much of England and Wales, thick enough for some patchy light rain and drizzle, but there will be some sunshine coming into the far south, but this could trigger one or two heavy showers as we move through into the latter part of the afternoon. Temperatures a little above average, feeling warm in that sunshine, 15 or 16 Celsius. Through this evening, heavy rain across central southern parts of England pushing northwards. Further rain also pushing in from the North Sea to affect parts of northern England. The clearest skies across Scotland, Northern Ireland for a time before it clouds over here. Temperatures for most generally remaining above freezing. So it's a mixed start to Monday, some bright skies across the far south, but as the day goes on, some heavy showers developing here. Cloudy across northern parts of England into Wales, rain spreading from here into Northern Ireland. Generally more cloud across Scotland too, but the best of the sunny spells, particularly across the west, holding on, some low cloud in the east, and temperatures again lifting towards the mid-teens.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to the second hour of Easter Sunday with Michael Portillo. A review by Dame Sarah Khan into social cohesion has found that 3/4 of people in Britain don't feel that they can speak their minds freely because of the threat of harassment. She singled out the incident in Batley in West Yorkshire where a school teacher has gone into hiding after showing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad to his class. How do we avoid such incidents happening in the future? I'll discuss that with the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama, Fiyaz Mughal. Northern Ireland experienced a rare burst of optimism in recent weeks as politicians resumed power sharing in Stormont and engaged in a string of goodwill gestures between the two communities. Does the sudden resignation of the DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson on Thursday, as he faces charges of historic sex offences, shake that political stability? We're across to Belfast to assess the impact. A much-loved Cambridge musical institution faces the chop. St John's Voices is a mixed-voice choir, and though quite young, has earned itself some powerful fans who've reacted with dismay to the news that it will be disbanded. One of those fans is Isenda Maxstone-Graham, who will join me to explain why the choir should be saved. Another cultural institution has suffered grave reputational damage recently. The British Museum has now appointed a new chief, Nicholas Cullinan, who currently directs the National Portrait Gallery. Can he turn the ship around? And we couldn't finish an Easter Sunday programme without some chocolates. I'll be trying my hand at decorating some Easter eggs with artisan chocolatier Liza Green. All of that to come. But first, your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, King Charles has made his first significant public appearance since his cancer diagnosis. Joined by the Queen, he smiled and waved as he arrived for an Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Other members of the royal family are also there, but the Prince and Princess of Wales are missing as Catherine continues her cancer treatment. Now, these are live pictures coming to you from Windsor. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker says the King's attendance is a good sign. And we can see the King and the Queen there greeting well-wishers outside of the church as they enjoy their Easter Sunday service in Windsor.
King looking well, looking strong, and clearly very determined to make an appearance on Easter Sunday. And that seems to have gone very well. The King and Queen exiting from the chapel at Windsor and greeting the crowds as they go. A lot of well wishes there.
Greeting well-wishers outside of the chapel. The King and Queen. The King there. Now, the Pope is leading Easter Mass at the Vatican amid concerns over his health. Thousands of people have turned out to see Pope Francis, who's been greeting crowds. His appearance welcome after he failed to attend a major Good Friday procession, cancelling at the last minute. The Vatican says the decision was made to preserve his health ahead of a vigil yesterday and today's Easter Sunday Mass. Pope Francis will hold Mass and his Orbi Orbi, his message to the city and the world. The blessing will be watched globally. In his Easter message, the Prime Minister paid tribute to the work of churches and Christian communities across the country.
Happy Easter, everyone. This weekend, as people come together to celebrate and reflect on the message at the heart of the Easter festival, I want to pay tribute to the incredible work of Christians in this country. The churches, charities, volunteers and fundraisers who live the Christian values of compassion, charity and self-sacrifice, supporting those in need and demonstrating what it means to love thy neighbour.
Sir Keir Starmer also posted on social media saying it's time for optimism and new beginnings. The Easter messages come as a new poll suggests the Tories are on track for their worst general election result. Survation found the party could win fewer than 100 seats, with Labour predicted to sweep to power with a landslide victory of 468 seats. The 15,000-person poll indicated the Conservatives would be wiped out in Scotland and Wales and hold just 98 seats in England. Now, the Energy Secretary has warned that Labour's dangerous net zero plans would leave Britain at the mercy of China. Labour has pledged to convert the country to clean power by 2030, 5 years earlier than the Conservatives. But Claire Coutinho told The Telegraph the plan would leave the UK over-reliant on Chinese-made metals, cables and batteries, just as Europe was weaning itself off Russian oil and gas. New gender clinics for children are due to open in England after a year-long delay and a waiting list of thousands. The news comes as the Tavistock Clinic in London officially closes its doors after a review found it was not safe for children. Around 250 patients were being treated at the controversial site. As of tomorrow, responsibility for their care will be transferred to the new clinics in the north and south of the country. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Sophia Wensler. Well, we are continuing to receive live pictures from Windsor of the King departing. The King has been attending the Easter service at the chapel at Windsor. The King was clearly very determined that he should do so. There was talk that the King was feeling frustrated because he was not allowed to do more of his duties. But he set upon attending the Easter service, and that has now happened. There was a reduced number of people allowed in the chapel because the King obviously has to be careful of being infected by members of the public. And what to me was very remarkable in the pictures that we saw a few moments ago is that the King, when he left the chapel, made his way across to the large crowd that was gathered there, certainly a crowd of well-wishers, and started to work the crowd. So whatever his medical advisors may have thought, he was very keen to make contact with people. And the King, I must say, looking very steady on his feet, very cheerful, and I think very pleased that he's done that particular piece of his duty today. A report by Dame Sarah Khan lays out in disturbing detail how a campaign of what she calls freedom-restricting harassment forced a teacher at Batley Grammar School in West Yorkshire to go into hiding. Khan found that such harassment frequently impacted the decisions of public sector authorities. So how do we avoid further such blasphemy rows? To consider that, it's my pleasure to be joined by Fayaz Mughal, who is the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama, an organisation that records anti-Muslim hatred. Fayaz, welcome to GB News. Thank you very much for joining me today. Give us some background on Batley and this broader conclusion that has been drawn that in the public sector, certainly, people are feeling very frightened, very intimidated, and that is affecting their work and their decision-making, as well as, obviously, their well-being.
Indeed, Michael. Thank you for having me on this morning. The Batley Grammar School, I would call it fiasco, took place in 2021. And it was in relation to a teacher who was conducting, I think, his 5th class in relation to discussion on things like free speech. And he used the Charlie Hebdo cartoon as a teaching tool with young school children. He had done this before, but it was a teaching tool for discussion. So there'd not been a kind of an outrage before. But that had been picked up by some groups online, and those groups started to spread information that Prophet Muhammad was being abused, and it whipped up a storm. That led to individuals from the local area, predominantly from the local Muslim community, again, a small number, but they started to protest outside the school, and the teacher felt threatened and intimidated enough that, in a way, he was fearing for his life just on conducting a simple classroom exercise around free speech. Now, that Batley teacher is still in hiding, has lost his career, suffers from PTSD, and to this day really doesn't look like he is employed. So the impact on a teacher conducting a basic classroom session on free speech has led to his effectively exclusion from society. That's the background to the Batley issues. That, in a way, has led to Dame Sarah Khan suggesting this issue of freedom restricting harassment as a key component of her report, and where there are chilling levels of harassment affecting our democratic institutions, things like intimidatory, abusive harassment, threatening activities, etc. So it's a good example, what she lays out of what's happened to somebody's life.
You talked about a fiasco, which in a way, I suppose, implies that you think that someone did something wrongly. I wanted to focus really on how we could avoid this sort of situation in the future. So please answer that. And perhaps you could give me evidence as to why you say that it's a small number. Can we be certain that it's a small number who are conducting themselves in this way?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Michael. It's a fiasco because the fact is a teacher conducting a classroom exercise which is about discussing free speech is a perfectly normal lesson to be conducted in any school in our country. The fact is that that teacher was, in a way, has reached a point where they are now excluded from society, did not feel supported by the local school, where the school effectively then started to listen to individuals, individuals who were connected to the demonstration, gave them the opportunity to have their voices heard, is why I mentioned the term fiasco. Because actually, any teacher should have the opportunity, if we are talking about creating an open-minded society, a society where we can discuss anything, that teacher should have had the full backing and support of the school, and in a way the school should not have been in a position where they were actually sitting around tables and discussing with those same very demonstrators issues of how sessions should be held in their school. So that's why I call it a fiasco.
Yeah.
The fact is we cannot be pandering to individuals who want to shut down democratic debate, discussion in our institutions, in our country. It really is as simple as that.
And how do you know they're small numbers?
A good point. Well, my work with Muslim communities has meant that I know that there are many who feel repulsed by what has taken place. Again, in a way, there is a guesstimation here around small numbers. And I say small numbers, but a small but growing component, because actually still in the wider context of Muslim communities, there are many who are repulsed by what took place against the teacher. Now, we don't have any exact figures, but I would say small but growing number of individuals who accept this issue of blasphemy in our society. And that's deeply problematic. And let's go back. This issue around blasphemy and curtailing free speech is not new. It goes back to the Salman Rushdie affair. We are talking 1989. So we are talking over 40 years of this blasphemy issue just sitting in our society and never being tackled. And I think there comes a time where we need to call it out. We need to challenge it. And Dame Sarah Khan's report makes that very clear. It is important for all of us to challenge it. But saying that, if we challenge it, and I'm the kind of person who's been challenging for years and had a lot of harassment from Islamist extremists, a lot of intimidation. I recently stepped down from a government role because of the intimidation myself. The fact is, government must step up and support individuals who challenge these extremist groups trying to undermine our ability to speak in our own society.
So let me ask you that. You've had this experience recently. You were put up for a job. You were intimidated. Yep. You withdrew. Have you had the sort of support since then that you would expect?
I had a couple of calls. I had a meeting with Michael Gove, who expressed his support. I'm deeply grateful for that. I had a call from the Home Office offering support, which was, well, we're here to listen. But this is, I welcome this support now. But the fact is, I've been saying this for 25 years, that we have real issues of extremism threatening people who are openly willing to challenge it. So I think it's support that's vocal, that's come very late in the day. What kind of practical support that is, I don't know, because government didn't tell me what kind of practical support they could give me. And the reality is, if that happens to me and I'm willing to stand up and challenge these kind of groups, well, what happens to the members of the public? Who wants to have their employers targeted? Who wants to have their family members targeted? We have a real problem here, that our institutions are under threat. The fact is, 40, 50 years ago, we were much more robust in tackling this. 2024, we are much weaker in tackling these kind of groups.
Fayez, I congratulate you on your courage and your backbone, and thank you very much for being on GB News today.
Thank you.
Northern Ireland has been experiencing some rare optimism after the resumption of power sharing at Stormont, and there were some high-profile gestures by politicians on both sides of the divide aimed at creating an atmosphere of goodwill. On Thursday, DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson was arrested and subsequently charged with historic sex offences. A 57-year-old woman was also charged with abetting those offences. Sir Geoffrey had steered the Unionists towards an agreement with the British government and returned to power sharing with the Sinn Féin First Minister. He's now resigned his position. What are the implications for Northern Ireland's politics? Ben Lowry is the editor of the Belfast Newsletter, and he joins me now. Ben, it's very good indeed to talk to you again. Now,
thank you.
Many people are worried about what the impact of this resignation could be on the recent but doubtless delicate stability that's been established in Northern Ireland. What would your comment on that be?
Well, the first thing I would say is that the immediate reaction from all the main players is to emphasize that everything's going to go on. So that is, I'm thinking of the interim leader of the DUP. Sir Geoffrey was the leader of the DUP. This is another MP called Gavin Robinson. He's emphasized that he's not in Stormont. You can't be in both. In the old days, you used to be able to be in both Stormont and Westminster, and many of the politicians were. So he's in Westminster. He's said he wants to keep Stormont going. The Deputy First Minister is a DUP politician, former MP Emma Little Pengelly. She's emphasized that she wants things to continue. And the Sinn Féin First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has said the same. But importantly, perhaps most importantly, Sammy Wilson, who's an MP, who's an open critic of the deal, and was really very much at odds with Sir Geoffrey in Sir Geoffrey's claim that the Irish Sea border had gone, a claim that has somewhat unravelled in recent weeks. He has emphasised that he doesn't want a leadership challenge this side of a general election or anything like that. So it had already been the case that Sir Geoffrey had remarkably little dissent to this deal. There were other politicians like Sammy Wilson who were criticising it, but they were emphasising their loyalty to the leadership. In fact, when I was last on this programme, I was expressing concern at Unionists seeming to acquiesce in everything. I don't think, given the shock, I mean, the primary reaction is utter shock. I mean, Sir Geoffrey was arrested at 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. I don't know much about policing operations, but my understanding from talking to police and lawyers is that a 6 a.m. arrest is designed to surprise people. And the utter shock is the predominant reaction. The second is that all the key players are saying they want Stormont to continue. I have not sure. I wonder whether I have turned off sound for you. I'm not hearing you.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Serving police officers, showing that up to 20% of them are thinking about quitting the force and doing so within the next year or two. What on earth is going wrong? Problem, of course, is that those that go will be the experienced ones to be replaced by inexperienced ones. Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, joins me from his home in Surrey. Kevin, this figure is shocking.
The terms and conditions have really dropped off under Theresa May's
what I would describe as an attack on the police service, where their pay has really dropped off, spending power down about 22% on what it once was. Worse still, the golden handcuffs, which were once the excellent police pension, have been taken away, and the pension is now much reduced. The other thing that's killing them is the constant media and activist battering for police officers. Off the back of that one psychopath and the other, if you like, Tinder rapist, everybody now thinks the police are kind of all like that. What that means for the individual patrol officers, they're being given stick everywhere. For example, you know, their bosses left, right and centre are rolling over, oh yes, we're institutionally racist. What that means to a 25-year-old constable working in Balham High Street is everyone screaming at him, you're a racist pig. They get surrounded on the streets when they try and do a stop and search or an arrest. Add to that the fact that the criminal justice system is collapsing. They're tipping out the prisons with early releases, so because, of course, there's no prison space. Cases are taking years to get to court. They're getting derisory sentences because there's no room in the prisons. All of that's really demoralising for the police.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have spotted that a technical hitch interrupted my conversation with Ben Lowry of the Belfast Newsletter, but I hope we can now resume. Ben, I was just saying to you that actually this might be an opportunity to step back a tiny bit and just analyse what are the overall general difficulties that beset unionism in Northern Ireland.
It's a very big question. Something of an analogy can be drawn with the Conservatives, but it's a much deeper problem than that. Let me just start with the analogy that can be drawn with the Conservatives, that an unpopularity, young people, changes in mood and so on, bad election results, turmoil, not knowing whether to be more liberal, not knowing whether to be more conservative. That's the analogy with the Conservatives. The analogy falls apart a little bit in that the unionist vote probably will never collapse for constitutional reasons. It has been declining slowly, but it would be too serious for unionist voters to abandon unionism. So that probably won't happen. But I think that the principal problems for unionism are three or fourfold. The first is the Irish Sea border. That nobody really understood it. It happened. It's a long story. You could write encyclopedias on it, but it has divided. It has done something that was unthinkable. I think it's the biggest constitutional change in Northern Ireland since its creation. There isn't unfettered trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, in spite of the deals. I won't go into the details. That's a huge problem. The second is unionism's really unfashionable. It's just it tends to have old-fashioned views on social questions. Not that old-fashioned. I don't think Ulster Protestants are that different from the rest of the UK, but it tends to be. And the Orange Order and the manifestations are old-fashioned. The other problem is demographic change. It's greatly exaggerated by enemies of unionism. The astonishing thing is 100 years later how strong the support is for staying in the UK. But it's still a real thing. And then you have just the multiple personalities. This is unionism is currently divided between three parties. The DUP has stayed the biggest party, but only just. So these are huge problems to start with, and are really quite I did say that Sir Geoffrey had astonishing success in getting Stormont back, but I think it was a slow burning problem that people were realizing that his claim that the Irish Sea border had gone was wrong. I mean, I've even said, not wanting to be unkind, I have said in podcasts that it's nonsense. I think it needs to be described as nonsense. And I think that that was slowly coming to the fore. So the one thing I would say is that the fact that Sammy Wilson, who's a critical player in this, for the time being is giving his support to the party. This is somebody, some people wondered whether he would leave and join a more hardline group called the TUV. That is really significant for things not completely falling apart now anyway.
Ben Larry, I thought that was extraordinarily interesting analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today on Easter Sunday on GB News. St John's Voices is a relatively new choir by the standards of the ancient University of Cambridge. The group of male and female singers was formed just in 2013. It has won a large and influential following at Evensong, and with its concerts and with its tours. So there was dismay when St John's College, Cambridge announced that the choir would be disbanded in order to redirect resources to a broader range of music. Choir members circulated an open letter saying that they were devastated by the decision, and they've been backed by figures who have included the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams. Here is a clip of the choir singing sacred choral music by the Russian composer Pavel Chesnokov. Glorious sound filling the chapel of St John's, Cambridge. Among the many articles written lamenting the decision to disband the St John's Voices is one in The Spectator by Isenda Maxstone-Graham, who joins me now. Isenda, welcome to GB News. What prompted you, provoked you to write your article in defence of the St John's Voices?
Well, my heart sank. It's just one more click of an email and away goes another gem of our country's incredible choral tradition, which was built up, as you say, from 2013. It was a choir that sang on Monday afternoons in St John's Chapel, while the world-renowned and wonderful main choir with child choristers has their one day off, and it was an opportunity for sopranos in St John's, of whom there are many, and proud and happy, and what a great thing that there are, to sing in their own chapel choir. They turned out to be not just any choir, but a seriously good one, as you can hear from that clip. I mean, world class, and it absolutely is built up to be a gem. And I can't work out what it is that has made this decision. The only paid member of the choir is the conductor, who I can't believe is paid very much for his one day a week job, just for a few hours, one day a week. Are they really going to? They've come up with 7 or 8 wishy-washy initiatives. It seems to me rather wishy-washy, which are all very well: community music making, innovative interdisciplinary projects, outreach and engagement programs. Does that really have to happen at the expense of this marvellous choir? And I beg them to reconsider.
I'm going to quote at least a part of quite a long statement that was made by St John's College. They say their council decision to pursue a broader approach to co-curricular opportunities was unanimous and reflects students' preferences and experiences in music today. It emphasises that St John's Voices is the second chapel choir of the college, after St John's College Choir, which was established in the 17th century. And the college adds that opportunities for soprano singers are exceptionally well provided for across the University of Cambridge. So, Isenda, that's what they're saying. What is going on? You say you can't work it out, but please work it out. What is going on?
I worry that it is a sort of so-called elitism, because of course we love elitism when it's in sport and we love it. But I think that there is just a general sense that it's a good idea to just broaden. Of course, broaden means thinning, doesn't it? Broaden out means something thinner, and you give everybody in the college a chance to sing in a non-audition choir, which is a great idea. But why does this have to be that? Why can't those people aspire to being in these absolutely top, wonderful choirs that sets an example and raises the standard and sets the gold standard for all the other music making in the college? So I do agree there are other colleges women can sing in, but why can't they sing? There's their lovely own chapel. There's this marvellous thing that does exist. It's been set up, creates beautiful music to bring congregations in on a rainy Monday afternoon in January, why can't that carry on? And St John's being second richest college in Cambridge, surely they can afford to run both. I think it's a more ideological rather than a financial decision.
And your article makes two very interesting points. One is about the decision in principle, and the other is that institutions like this can be abolished by email. An email was sent out just after the choir had completed 3 days of recording sessions and typically had displayed their brilliance. That's Isenda Maxstone Graham. Later in the show, I'll be trying my hand at decorating Easter eggs. Before that, here are the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
It's 12:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. King Charles has made his first significant public appearance since his cancer diagnosis. Joined by the Queen, he smiled and waved as he left an Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor and went on to greet crowds, shaking people's hands. Other members of the royal family were also there, but the Prince and Princess of Wales are missing the service as Catherine continues her cancer treatment. Tens of thousands of people turned out to see Pope Francis preside over Easter Mass at the Vatican and the delivery of his Urbi et Urbi to the city and the world, blessing from the balcony of the St. Peter's Basilica. The pontiff, who has been dealing with health problems, used his address to renew his call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, as well as the release of all Israeli hostages. Sir Keir Starmer also posted on social media, giving his Easter message. The Easter messages come as the new poll suggests the Tories are on track for their worst general election result. Survation found the party could win fewer than 100 seats, with Labour predicted to sweep to power with a landslide victory of 468 seats. The 15,000-person poll indicated the Conservatives would be wiped out in Scotland and Wales and hold just 98 seats in England. For the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, Michael will be back after a short break.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish?
The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. You know, one of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. Well, why not spend 100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people, black British people? Why not just help all people in need?
Alex?
Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little bit...
Well, look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news there's mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money... And as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society, it benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said 1 million's not enough. 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of 1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Should charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free. I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The British Museum faces testing times following the scandalous theft of artefacts last year. The demands to return parts of its collection, most notably the Elgin marbles, and a proposed £1 billion redevelopment of its building. To lead it through these challenges, it has appointed a new director. Nicholas Cullinan currently directs the National Portrait Gallery. Is he the right choice? To answer that, I'm joined by archaeologist Mario Trabucco de la Torreta. Mario, it's lovely to talk to you again. Now, where should we start? Let's start with the £1 billion redevelopment that the British Museum has to undertake. That is a very big management project. Nicholas Cullinan had an important experience at the National Portrait Gallery. Does it equip him for the task?
On one side, obviously, this was the massive checkbox that every candidate needed to tick, that is having a substantial experience of a full renovation of a nationally significant collection like the National Portrait Gallery. But on the other side, if we need to look at the history of what he has done as a trace to interpret what he's going to do at the British Museum, I'm a little bit concerned because on one side, yes, obviously, the project was delivered on time, was delivered on budget. It was £41 million kind of project. And this obviously lets us have good hopes. On the other side, the project for the renovation of the British Museum is 20 times bigger. This obviously means also that this project is going to be delivered in significantly different conditions because the renovation of the National Portrait Gallery happened during COVID, so without actually having visitors in for most of the time. The British Museum is obviously not going to be shut down entirely like the MPG was. The other problems I can see is the way the renovation is going to be performed, the results that are going to be delivered. On one side, the MPG has delivered 20% more exhibition space, which is obviously something to be looked at favorably. But on the other side, there is a tinge of modernist sensibilities that can, in a way, taint this kind of result. For example, on the facade of the National Portrait Gallery, we have 16 roundels with British giants of the arts. And as part of the renovation, they've decided to kind of balance these by engaging Tracy Emin, the Royal Academician, to make 3 new bronze portals with roundels and figures of female artists or idealized figures. This was supposed to kind of balance the too male and stale kind of appearance of the National Portrait Gallery so far. They have worn as a mark of honor the fact that they have now brought the quantity, the share of female sitters in the hangings of the collection from 35% to 48%. So are we going to look at the renovation of the British Museum under this kind of light? That's where I'm a little bit more uneasy.
So you're really talking here about the degree to which he may be affected by wokery, political correctness, by agenda items which aren't strictly artistic or curatorial, at least in your opinion.
Correct.
And having identified that as the issue, the saving of a very important portrait by the National Portrait Gallery, yes. What did that tell us about Cullinan's attitudes and indeed methods?
It's an interesting story. We're talking about the portrait of Omai that has been recently added to the collection, only in part because it came with a price tag of £50 million, and this deal has been secured 50-50 paying with the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. So now this is going to be a sort of timeshare, a joint possession of the item, which is a first in terms of an international joint possession. Joint ownership, I should say, because right now we have already experience of items that are jointly owned, for example, from the National Gallery and the National Gallery of Scotland, or with Cardiff and other places. But it's always been in the UK. He needed to raise the £50 million that were needed to secure this painting, which in itself is also a story, because it was like it's not the most brilliant painting of Sir Joshua Reynolds. Is it because the sitter is kind of ticking the diversity and inclusion box that we really wanted this painting to enter the collection? Be as it may, he didn't manage to secure the £50 million. He struggled a lot to get to half of it, and only after the Ministry of Culture basically allowed a third consecutive, again another first, extension of the ban, of the export ban that would potentially have brought the picture elsewhere in the world. This raises significant concerns, obviously, because it's going to need to raise again 20 times as much in terms of money. And for the renovation of the British Museum, and if this performance is what we need to kind of expect, this doesn't bode well, obviously. On the other side, even the joint ownership is a bit of a problem, in my opinion, in the opinion of people that know way more than I do about this. It raises way more problems than it actually solves. So it's like, did we really need to go to these lengths to secure these portraits? And if this is the model of financing, exactly, what's going to happen in the British Museum?
So just to explain to people, we've been talking about Nicholas Cullinan, who is transferring from the National Portrait Gallery to the British Museum. Thank you very much indeed, Mario Trabucco de la Torreta, and happy Easter to you, sir. Stir not, please, as I shall be getting my fingers dirty, decorating some Easter eggs in a few minutes' time.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. Well, the best of the weather today continues to be across the northwest of the UK. We will see some heavy rain pushing in from the south, and that's thanks to low pressure still dominating the weather pattern, and will do for the next week or so as well, bringing in further spells of rain over the next 24 hours or so. But for the rest of the day, best of the sunshine across Scotland, perhaps northern England into Northern Ireland too. This morning's rain clearing here. Generally cloudier skies across much of England and Wales, thick enough for some patchy light rain and drizzle, but there will be some sunshine coming into the far south, but this could trigger 1 or 2 heavy showers as we move through into the latter part of the afternoon. Temperatures a little above average, feeling warm in that sunshine, 15 or 16 Celsius. Through this evening, heavy rain across central southern parts of England, pushing northwards. Further rain also pushing in from the North Sea to affect parts of northern England. The clearest skies across Scotland, Northern Ireland for a time before it clouds over here. Temperatures for most generally remaining above freezing. So it's a mixed start to Monday, some bright skies across the far south, but as the day goes on, some heavy showers developing here. Cloudy across northern parts of England into Wales, rain spreading from here into Northern Ireland. Generally more cloud across Scotland too, but the best of the sunny spells, particularly across the west, holding on, some low cloud in the east, and temperatures again lifting towards the mid-teens.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Some of you may have come across an amusing Twitter thread about me. It was the impressive work of a man called Brian Elwick, who discovered the hidden code behind my outfit choices. They are, of course, inspired by Easter eggs. Here I am, dressed as a flake. Good. Here I am, dressed as a creme egg. Here's my Malteser outfit. Got it. And today I've come back as the Whisper. These are, of course, the mass-manufactured Easter eggs, but I'm delighted to be joined now by an artisanal chocolatier, Lisa Green. She has excellent pedigree, being half Belgian, and she's going to show me how to decorate these eggs. And she's brought some in. Lisa, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Before we turn to your delightful-looking eggs, which are very pretty already before we even touch them, tell me a little bit about your business. What does it consist of?
Well, my business is artisanal. It's basically me in a domestic kitchen in northwest London, helped by my long-suffering husband. We are expanding as we speak, but we're a very small business. We take a lot of pride in our work. And I love it because it's hugely creative. We basically supply direct to customer, and we are hopefully building a loyal fan base.
When you say direct to customer, do you mean individuals, or do you mean, would it be like hotels and restaurants and so on?
Well, it can be both. We have customers who come directly to the website. We have businesses who come to us directly saying, we want to give our customers a gift, so can we have 20 boxes a month? So it's varied. It is varied. But it's all very... we make our products with a lot of time and a lot of care.
Now, I would speculate that you don't just make Easter eggs because you have to keep going all the year. What do you do the rest of the year?
The rest of the year, at the moment, I'm doing mixed boxes of chocolates with a variety of centres, and they're all made by myself. Over Christmas, we were extremely busy because we also launched boxes of 24 that proved quite popular. For Valentine's Day, we tend to focus on hearts. And the advantage of being small is that we can be really adaptive and very creative. So if we decide one week, hey, there's a coronation coming up, we're going to make a chocolate in the shape of a crown, we can do it without too much fuss.
OK, now, you're going to paint your eggs.
Yes.
With what? Not with paint, I assume?
Well, it does look a bit like paint. What I'm going to do, excuse scary gloves, I'm going to give a demo on how I paint a large Easter egg, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Michael, and you're going to do exactly the same thing. We can't fill them with chocolate because chocolate is very temperamental.
Of course. And
has to be kept at a very consistent temperature. But what we're going to do is I'll show you how I made my Easter egg. They're all hand-painted. Let's pop these out of the way. So the first thing I do is I get an Easter egg mould.
Yeah.
It's made of polycarbonate. It's a professional mould, so it's very solid. And you can reuse it time and time again. And then I'm going to take a bit of edible gold leaf and...
Can't have any gold in it.
Well...
Firstly, gold's poisonous.
That's not my problem.
And secondly, it's too expensive. Anyway, something that's very like gold, yes?
It's inflation.
Oh, look at that.
But it is edible, and you can see... It's edible gold, you can see it sticks on absolutely everything.
OK.
So you have to use tweezers.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put a bit in each mould, and I'm going to pat it down so that it sticks to the mould.
Are you able to lift that up a tiny bit so the camera can see it more?
Yeah.
Yes. OK. And just do a bit of pushing around what you're doing there.
So basically, you have to push it down. Do it with a dry hand, a clean finger, or a glove.
Right.
Because it basically moves all over the place. So you have to make sure it's...
And then what? You're going to put an egg into that, are you?
No. What we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to put in... This is coloured cocoa butter, and it has to be melted around the same temperature of chocolate, so about between 32 degrees, sometimes a bit higher. And what you do is you have to melt it completely, or almost melt it completely, put some on the plate, and then to make it the right consistency, you have to dip your finger in it, like that, until it slightly thickens. Then I'm going to get my mould, and I'm going to start basically making circles.
OK, very pretty.
So it's quite simple.
Yes, but very labour-intensive. My goodness. Every egg has to be done in this way, does it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we don't make that many. And then that will set over the next couple of minutes, but obviously because we're a bit pressed for time, I'm going to cover it.
We are quite pressed for time, yes.
I'm going to cover it with another layer, and this is black cocoa butter. You can use whatever colours you want. I quite like these because they form quite a nice contrast.
While you're doing that, tell me what your website address is. And
My website, it's lisagreenchocolates.co.uk.
So people got to remember Lisa Green.
Yes.
Which is L-I-Z-A.
L-I-Z-A,
yes,
exactly.
It's not an S.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, look,
and then what you can see is you can see the start of quite a nice contrasting pattern. And then once that's dried, this needs to be filled to the brim with chocolate, which has to be at about 30.5 degrees for milk. You fill it up, leave it for a few minutes, pat it out, do the same in another mould, and then, if you're lucky, you will end up with something that looks like that.
That is absolutely pretty. In the time remaining, I only really have a moment to sort of play with that.
Yeah, of course,
so
go ahead.
Give that to me, if you would.
I'll give you some gold. The first challenge is to actually get it to stick on. So there we are.
Thank you very much.
You can use it. You can use just a glove.
Oh!
You see, there you go. I told you it goes everywhere.
There we are. I've managed to rescue a little bit of gold. I caught that. So you put that down in there.
Yeah.
And somehow push that around.
Yeah.
It's jolly sticky stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very sticky and it's quite fiddly.
Let me see if I've got any more gold in there. Just got a little bit of gold.
And then...
I think you need to practice quite a lot for this.
Yes. I did waste quite a lot of gold leaf the first time I did it.
Yes.
You can just put a tiny bit and just swirl it round. That's it. It's very hard at first. You either put too much or too little.
I'll tell you what's going to happen here. My famous coloured clothes are going to change to different colours. Lisa Green, thank you very much indeed
Pleasure.
for coming on and talking to us about these marvellous painted chocolate eggs. I'd like to thank all my guests, particularly those who came into the studio on Easter Sunday. I've really enjoyed celebrating Easter with all of you at home. I'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. We've had some sunshine across the north and the west, but over the next 24 hours it does turn more unsettled. Low pressure dominating the weather yet again over the next few days. We see further spells of rain, heavy showers pushing across the country, some brisk winds later on in the week as well. For the evening time, we do have some heavy showers pushing into central southern areas. We could see some localised flooding here. Met Office warning in force for the evening time, and then overnight this rain pushes slowly northwards. Further rain pushing into eastern areas too, with Northern Ireland and Scotland seeing the driest weather with some clear spells, but the vast majority of us, temperatures remaining above freezing. So a mixed start on Monday. Outbreaks of rain across northern England into central parts and Wales as well. Some of this heavy at times. Brighter skies following across central southern areas, but into the afternoon we'll see some heavy thundery showers developing, some hail possible. Parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland will see some drier weather, some sunny spells, and here temperatures lifting to around 13 or 14 Celsius. Feeling quite cold under the cloud and rain. Temperatures in single figures. For Tuesday, we'll see areas of rain across the top and tail of the country. In between, we'll see some sunny spells, but some scattered showers also developing. And it remains unsettled for the week ahead. Further showers and some heavy spells of rain as well, and temperatures just climbing a little.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.